7 Signs You've Survived Difficulties. Carl Jung's views on pain, strength, and transformation. Carl Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." And if you're here today, it's very likely that your struggles have shaped you in ways you may not yet fully understand. In this video from Spiritual Wisdom, we explore the 7 signs that prove you're not just surviving difficulties, you're transforming through them. These insights from Jung can help you recognize your own strength, heal more deeply, and step into a wiser, more grounded version of yourself. As you listen, ask yourself, which of these signs resonate with your journey the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your story may be exactly what someone else needs to hear. 1. You've transformed solitude into sanctuary. You no longer fear being alone because solitude has shifted from something that once felt like punishment into a sanctuary where your soul finally finds space to breathe. There was a time when silence felt heavy, when the absence of others made you question your worth, and when being alone triggered the old abandonment wound that kept you chasing validation and clinging to people who couldn't see you clearly. But life, through its quiet and often painful lessons, has guided you toward a deeper understanding. Solitude is not emptiness, it is clarity. It is the sacred room where your spirit returns to itself, where your thoughts settle like calm water, and where your inner world becomes a place of truth, not fear. This shift marks a profound stage of spiritual awakening, one where stillness becomes a companion rather than a threat. As you've grown, you've discovered that solitude holds a kind of spiritual power that the noise of the world could never give you. Instead of restlessness, there is now a calm presence within you, a steady rhythm that reminds you of your resilience and your ability to create peace from within. You no longer feel the need to chase after people for comfort because you have learned to comfort yourself. In this quiet space, insights rise effortlessly. Creative energy flows naturally, and you begin to understand that your relationship with yourself is the foundation of every other relationship you will ever have. The wound of abandonment no longer controls your decisions, because you've learned that needing someone is not the same as depending on them for identity. You've reclaimed pieces of yourself that were once hidden behind fear, and that reclamation has made your solitude feel sacred rather than lonely. This new way of being has also unlocked a deeper connection to your inner wisdom, a form of spiritual clarity that guides you even when life feels uncertain. When you sit alone now, you feel the gentle presence of your intuition speaking to you, the quiet whispers that were once drowned out by distraction. You've stopped running from yourself, and in doing so, you've opened the door to a deeper kind of self-love that grows not from external approval, but from inner recognition. Solitude has become the soil where your spiritual growth takes root, where you recognize your worth without needing an audience, and where your heart learns to rest without fear of being forgotten. In this sanctuary of quiet, you've transformed pain into understanding, chaos into insight, and silence into a powerful expression of strength. Have you ever found peace in your own silence? If you've turned solitude into a sacred space for healing and growth, share your story in the comments to inspire others. If you're still learning to embrace it, comment, "I choose peace," and let this be the start of your transformation. 2. You've integrated your shadow self. You've integrated your shadow self in a way that only someone who has truly survived deep inner challenges can understand. Because instead of rejecting your darker impulses, anger, control, power, you've learned to face them honestly and transform them into sources of strength. As Carl Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And you have already done exactly that by allowing yourself to acknowledge what once felt unacceptable. You no longer see anger as a force that will ruin your life. Instead, you recognize it as your internal signal that your boundaries matter and your voice deserves to be heard. When anger rises inside you now, you do not explode or collapse. You redirect it, allowing it to fuel growth, courage, and clarity. Moments that once triggered you into emotional spirals now become opportunities to act with awareness, because the power that used to overwhelm you is now a tool you consciously use. You've also made peace with your contradictions, recognizing that your inner world is not meant to be pure light or pure darkness, but a balanced landscape where all parts of you coexist. You understand that spirituality is not about cutting away the uncomfortable aspects of yourself, but about holding everything in sacred tension. Your vulnerability and your resilience, your fear and your confidence, your softness and your fire. This shift marks a deep stage of spiritual development, because the moment you stopped fighting yourself, you began to expand from within. Instead of hiding your impulses or fearing they would consume you, you welcomed them, sat with them, listened to them, and allowed them to reveal hidden truths about your past wounds, unmet needs, and buried strength. Through this, your shadow stopped being the part of you that sabotaged your growth and became the teacher guiding you toward self-mastery. Your inner world has become calmer, clearer, and more stable because you no longer waste energy pretending to be someone perfect. You don't filter your humanity to appear spiritual. You understand that true spirituality is the courage to be whole. This wholeness shows up in subtle yet powerful ways. You pause before reacting. You choose silence over unnecessary conflict, and you hold your emotions with steadiness instead of drowning in them. You trust yourself in situations that once made you doubt everything, because you now know exactly where your strength comes from. It comes from integration, not suppression. It comes from understanding yourself, not controlling yourself. It comes from having walked through your own inner darkness and realizing that nothing inside you is too dangerous to face. Your shadow impulses, anger, control, power have not disappeared. They have evolved. Anger has become honesty. Control has become discipline. Power has become self-respect. Together, they form a strong inner core that protects you without hardening you, sharpens you without breaking you, and empowers you without disconnecting you from compassion. By embracing every part of who you are, you've stepped into a kind of internal freedom that many never reach. And this freedom continues to reshape how you love, how you choose, how you speak, and how you live. Your journey proves that when you honor your shadow instead of running from it, you unlock the strength, wisdom, and grounded authenticity that were waiting for you all along. Are you ready to face and embrace your shadow self? If so, comment below. I am whole, to affirm your courage and commitment to true inner transformation. 3. You've developed emotional mastery and boundary clarity. You've developed a kind of emotional mastery that only those who have walked through real difficulty ever gain. You no longer crumble under emotional intensity because you've learned how to stay present with your feelings instead of drowning in them. You can sit with sadness, anger, fear, or confusion and still remain centered, grounded, and aware. And when others bring their heavy emotions to you, you hold space without losing yourself, which shows that you've become stronger, not through avoidance, but through conscious transformation. As Carl Jung taught, there is no coming to consciousness without pain, and it's your pain that has sharpened your awareness until you can now see through emotional chaos with clarity and calm. What once overwhelmed you no longer breaks you, because you have learned who you are beneath every emotional wave. This strength is also why projection barely touches you anymore. When someone tries to place their insecurities, fears, or unresolved wounds onto you, you can recognize immediately that it's their inner turbulence, not your truth. In the past, you may have internalized everything, believing that every harsh word or emotional attack was somehow your fault. But now, you see the deeper psychology behind human behavior. You understand when someone is trying to use you as a container for their unhealed parts, and instead of absorbing their energy, you simply observe it. This is the moment when spiritual wisdom becomes real, when you can look at another person's reaction and say, "This belongs to them, not to me." You are no longer pulled into other people's storms, because you have become the calm center within your own. As your awareness deepened, your compassion transformed too. It is no longer the kind of compassion that leads to self-sacrifice or silent suffering. Instead, it has matured into presence steady, grounded, and fully awake. You care deeply, but you no longer carry what was never yours to hold. You can love someone without dissolving into their pain, and you can offer support without abandoning yourself. This shift marks a profound inner evolution, the moment when you realize that love without boundaries is not love, it's self-erasure. Now you understand that compassion rooted in clarity is far more powerful than compassion rooted in fear or guilt. Your boundaries, once fragile or inconsistent, have now become sacred. You see them not as rejection, but as protection, not as distance, but as alignment. You guard your energy with intention because you finally know its value. You choose who enters your inner world, who gets access to your softness, and who deserves to sit at your emotional table. These boundaries are the result of everything you've learned. That your peace matters, that your heart is not a dumping ground, and that your healing requires you to honor yourself first. Every time you say no, every time you step away from chaos, every time you choose peace over approval, you affirm the deep transformation that has taken place within you. Don't forget to subscribe for more spiritual wisdom on mastering your emotions, setting clear boundaries, and transforming pain into strength. 4. You rely on intuition and spiritual insight over logic alone. You begin to rely on intuition and spiritual insight over logic alone when something deep within you has awakened, shifting you from a life directed by external noise to one guided by inner clarity. After surviving difficulties, your inner knowing sharpens in a way that logic alone cannot explain. You start sensing truths beneath the surface, feeling the subtle pull of energies, and recognizing patterns that others overlook. Instead of demanding proof, You trust what rises inside you first, the quiet tug in your chest, the sudden clarity that appears without explanation, the way your spirit reacts before your mind has time to interpret. This is not imagination. It is the refined intelligence of a soul that has walked through fire and learned to listen. As your spirituality deepens, synchronicity becomes one of your strongest teachers. You notice meaningful coincidences the moment they appear, repeating messages, aligned moments, unexpected confirmations that seem to arrive with perfect timing. These occurrences no longer feel random. They feel like whispers from a universe that has been watching your growth, nudging you toward the places your heart already knows are right. You follow these signs with more confidence because the old version of you, the one who doubted everything, has dissolved through pain and transformation. Your intuition becomes even sharper when you learn to read the space between words, sensing what people feel, even when they try to hide it. You pick up emotional shifts in a room before anyone speaks, recognizing tension, sincerity, dishonesty, or affection through the slightest energetic cues. This ability is born from your spiritual awakening, when your consciousness expands beyond logic and you begin to perceive the world in layers. You no longer rely solely on what is spoken. You rely on what is felt. You also begin to trust ancestral wisdom, the subtle inheritance passed down through generations. Sometimes this guidance comes through dreams, deep instincts, or the sudden feeling that an unseen presence is helping you choose the right path. In these moments, you understand the truth of what Carl Jung meant when he said that the unconscious is not just personal, it is also collective. You carry the memory and resilience of those who came before you, and their strength flows through you when you need it most. Your reliance on inner alignment over external logic is also a sign of individuation, the psychological and spiritual process Jung described as becoming your true self. When this process unfolds, you stop seeking approval from the outside world because your decisions are rooted in inner truth. You begin to live from the deepest part of your being, making choices that match your values, intuition, and spiritual wisdom. You are no longer easily swayed, no longer lost, no longer dependent on the opinions of others, because your inner guidance system has become stronger than any external voice. Over time, intuition becomes your natural way of navigating life. Instead of forcing outcomes, you feel into them. Instead of overthinking, you tune in. Instead of doubting yourself, you trust the inner signal that has guided you through darkness and brought you into a higher understanding. This does not mean you reject logic. It means logic now works in harmony with your spiritual awakening. Your mind analyzes, but your soul leads. 5. You understand and embrace life's cycles. You no longer resist the movement of life or the quiet dissolutions that come with growth. You begin to see that every ending is not a punishment, but an initiation into a deeper cycle of becoming. And every death of the old self carries within it the tender birth of the new. You feel the rhythm of life as a series of death and rebirth spirals, and instead of clinging to permanence, you surrender to transformation. This surrender is not weakness. It is the highest act of wisdom, the moment when spirituality turns from belief into lived experience. You accept uncertainty as a sacred companion rather than a threat, realizing that not knowing is part of the great unfolding of your destiny. When you stop running from impermanence, peace begins to find you. The energy that was once scattered through busyness, distraction, and the endless need to prove yourself now gathers quietly within. You act with intention rather than urgency. You speak less, but say more. You move slower, but with purpose. This focus marks a great leap in spiritual development, the shift from surviving life to consciously living it. You start to notice that you no longer crave validation. Your center of gravity has moved inward. Your strength no longer depends on what others see in you, but on what you know to be true within you. And in this space of grounded awareness, your creativity blooms into something different. It is no longer an effort to impress or to gain recognition. It becomes sacred, an offering of your truth, your pain, your beauty, your wisdom. Each act of creation feels like breathing with the universe, a dance between your soul and something eternal. You create not because you must, but because you are full. You express not to be seen, but because you are connected. This is when life itself becomes your art, and every choice, every word, every silence becomes a brushstroke on the canvas of your becoming. When you stop resisting the cycles of transformation, you align with the intelligence that governs all existence. You learn that every fall has a purpose, every loss hides a seed of renewal, and every silence holds a deeper song. You come to trust the invisible rhythm of life, where endings are not to be feared but honored. In doing so, you embody the essence of true spirituality and acceptance so deep that even in uncertainty, you find peace. Even in change, you find strength. And even in surrender, you find yourself. If this message resonates with you and you're ready to honor the cycles of your life, repeat after me. I trust the process of life, and I welcome every season with strength and clarity. 6. You've outgrown the need for external validation. When you outgrow the need for external validation, something profound shifts inside you as you begin to understand what Carl Jung meant when he said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Because you no longer move through life begging for approval or shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. Instead, you start listening to your inner authority, the quiet but powerful voice that hardship has sharpened within you. This is where spiritual wisdom begins to guide your steps, allowing you to feel your worth without performing for it. Because when the inferiority complex dissolves, you stop measuring your value through comparison and finally recognize that nobody can define you better than your own soul. Praise becomes pleasant but unnecessary. Criticism becomes information rather than a wound, and you realize that your identity can no longer be shaken by the opinions of those who never walked through your struggles, because you've learned that external noise can never overpower inner clarity. You begin carrying yourself with a grounded kind of self-possession, the kind that doesn't need to shout to be felt, and you move with an authenticity that becomes your compass in every situation. The old craving for validation fades because you understand its illusion. You see how often people seek approval to fill the emptiness created by avoiding their true selves, and you refuse to live that way anymore. You now act from integrity rather than insecurity, from truth rather than fear. And this shift marks a level of personal evolution that only those who have endured deep emotional storms can reach. As Jung taught, individuation requires courage, And your courage now shows in the way you choose your path without waiting for others to confirm it for you. You begin trusting your decisions, your intuition, and your emotional intelligence without overthinking whether people will approve, because you finally accept that your life is your responsibility, not a performance for spectators. Trends stop seducing you, opinions stop distracting you, and comparison stops imprisoning you, because you have learned one of life's most defining lessons. Authenticity will always outlive validation. You now see that applause is temporary, but alignment is eternal. You understand that self-worth cannot be borrowed from compliments. It must be generated from within. And this is exactly what you're doing now. Generating your own sense of worth, your own inner rhythm, your own clarity about who you are and what you deserve. Every difficult chapter you've survived has shaped this transformation, teaching you that the world's approval is fragile, but the self-knowledge you've earned is unshakable. You stop asking for permission to exist, to shine, or to choose differently, because you finally realize that nobody can give you what your own soul has already granted you: freedom. So you walk forward not loudly, but confidently knowing that validation is no longer the fuel you need. Instead, your strength now comes from a place that hardship carved open within you, a place where your truth lives, a place where your identity stands firm, and a place where your spirit finally breathes without fear. If this insight resonates with you today, declare it in the comments. I no longer seek validation. I trust my inner wisdom and my own path. Your words affirm your growth. 7. You've achieved energetic sovereignty. You've reached a level of inner mastery where you finally understand that your energy is not something to be wasted, negotiated, or handed out carelessly, but a sacred force that shapes your entire reality. And because of this awareness, you now protect it with a clarity and conviction that you once wished you had. You have learned through pain and experience that saying no does not make you unkind. It makes you aligned. And setting limits is not a sign of coldness, but a sign of self-respect. Carl Jung often emphasized that the process of individuation requires a fierce commitment to one's inner truth, and you now embody that principle effortlessly, choosing what nourishes your soul and releasing what drains it. Understanding that boundaries are not walls to keep the world out, but doors that guide the right people in. Through the silent battles you've survived, you've transformed raw suffering into spiritual wisdom, turning every scar into a reminder of how far you've come and how deeply you've grown. And this evolution has reshaped your presence into something steady, grounded, and quietly powerful. Your energy has become more selective, not out of fear, but out of discernment, because you have awakened to the truth that not every space deserves you, and not every connection is meant to be permanent. There is a new depth in you now, a calm that cannot be easily disturbed, and people can sense it before you speak. You are no longer the version of yourself who chased after validation or tried to rescue everyone. Instead, you have become someone who knows when to lean in and when to step back, when to engage and when to preserve your peace. This shift is part of your spiritual awakening, the moment when you realize that stillness itself can be a form of power, and that choosing solitude can be a form of strength. The more you understand your inner world, the more magnetic your outer presence becomes, because you are no longer fragmented or scattered. You are whole, intentional, and rooted in your truth. Life no longer feels like something that happens to you. It becomes something you shape, influence, and co-create with clarity. You are not constantly recovering from yesterday because you no longer live in the shadows of your past. Instead, you create from the present, aware that your thoughts, your energy, and your emotional state are powerful instruments that help you build the future you desire. You move differently now, with a grounded confidence that comes from surviving what once felt impossible. And this groundedness becomes the foundation upon which your new life unfolds. You no longer rush, force, or beg for what is not meant for you. Instead, you choose what aligns with your inner peace and release what threatens it. This is what sovereignty feels like, not dominance over others, but mastery over yourself. And as you continue walking this path, you carry with you the living proof that transformation is not only possible, but inevitable when you commit to your healing, honor your boundaries, and trust the quiet guidance of your own spirit. In the end, these 7 signs remind you of one profound truth. Surviving your deepest difficulties was never a punishment. It was preparation. As Carl Jung taught, the pain you walk through was a silent initiation shaping your strength, sharpening your perception, and guiding you toward a more conscious, authentic version of yourself. If these insights from spiritual wisdom spoke to your journey, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Your transformation is already unfolding. Stay with us on this path. The final truth that changes you forever. Carl Jung's most haunting lesson. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Welcome back to Spiritual Wisdom, where today we explore the haunting yet liberating truth that has the power to change your life forever. This isn't just another idea to think about. It's a lens that can transform the way you understand yourself, your relationships, and every challenge you face. As you listen, I invite you to reflect deeply. Do you believe that your inner world shapes everything you experience on the outside? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because your insight might inspire someone else on their journey. Let's dive into this revelation together and discover how applying it daily can lead to real growth, clarity, and lasting happiness. 1. Everything in your life is a reflection of yourself. Everything in your life is a reflection of yourself, and this singular truth becomes the foundation of every genuine step towards spirituality and spiritual awakening. When Jung said, "There is no real objectivity," he wasn't speaking in metaphor. He was describing the direct structure of your experience. You have never encountered reality as it actually is, not even once, because every situation, every relationship, and every struggle you face passes through the invisible lens of your inner world. This lens is shaped by your childhood wounds, your unconscious fears, your hidden longings, and the parts of yourself you have rejected or denied. In other words, the world you think you are dealing with is actually a projection of your psyche, and every moment of your life becomes a message from the deepest layers of your mind, asking you to look inward instead of outward. Jung called this lens the glass of your own psychology. And through this glass, everything becomes personal because everything is filtered. A painful memory that you never resolved becomes the reason you react so quickly in certain conversations. A forgotten insecurity becomes the source of jealousy, comparison, or defensiveness. Even the people who trigger you the most are mirrors showing the traits you don't want to admit you carry. And the people who inspire you are reflections of your own dormant greatness asking to be awakened. Nothing is random, and nothing is neutral. It is all a projection of you meeting yourself again and again until you finally recognize what is being shown. When you understand this more deeply, you begin to realize why certain patterns repeat in your life. The same types of relationships, the same disappointments, the same emotional reactions keep resurfacing, not because life is cruel, but because your unconscious mind is persistent. It keeps bringing you the same kinds of experiences so that you can finally see the truth behind them. Until you have healed a wound, it will continue to appear in different disguises. Until you confront a fear, it will continue to shape your decisions from the shadows. This is why Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Because what you refuse to face inside eventually becomes the life you are forced to live outside. And when you begin to accept that every conflict is an inner conflict reflected outward, your entire world starts to shift. Suddenly, criticism from others becomes an invitation to see where you feel inadequate. Rejection becomes a mirror revealing where you have rejected yourself. Betrayal becomes a message showing you where you ignored your intuition or abandoned your boundaries. Even your biggest problems stop feeling like punishments and start looking like teachers because they are. The universe is not trying to hurt you. It is trying to wake you up. It is using your external experiences to guide you back to the places inside yourself that are asking for healing, integration, and truth. This is the heart of spiritual awakening, realizing that nothing outside you has the power you once believed it did. Your reality is not created by circumstances. It is created by the meaning your mind assigns to those circumstances. And once you understand that, you step into a level of spiritual responsibility and spiritual freedom that transforms everything. For the first time, you stop seeing life as something that happens to you, and you start seeing it as something that happens through you, shaped by the deepest parts of who you are and who you are becoming. If this truth resonates with you, declare it with certainty. Comment below, I see myself clearly, and I choose to grow. 2. You live in a psychological simulation that you yourself created. You live in a psychological simulation that you yourself created. And once you truly understand this, you stop waiting for the world to treat you differently, because you finally see that life is not happening to you, but through you, shaped moment by moment by your beliefs, wounds, and hidden expectations. Everything you call reality is filtered through your inner world so completely that you often mistake your reactions for facts, forgetting that it is your mind that projects your life, not the outside world forcing itself upon you. This is why the people who annoy you are never coincidences. They are mirrors reflecting your rejected part, the traits or emotions you buried long ago, now returning through someone else so you can finally face them. And the people you constantly talk about in your head, those who replay again and again in your inner dialogue, are not just random thoughts. You are actually meeting your potential that does not exist yet. The version of you that wants to grow but has not been fully expressed, which is why your mind keeps bringing them forward, urging you to pay attention to the qualities they represent. When your life repeats the same emotional story, again in relationships, again in family patterns, again in career disappointments, understand that nothing is wrong with you. These cycles show up because repetitive story patterns are psychological lessons not seen directly, returning until you finally understand the truth they carry, no matter how frustrating they feel. These patterns are invitations rather than punishments, guiding you back to the areas of your psyche that need healing, integration, and spiritual understanding. The more you resist them, the louder they become. But the moment you recognize what they are actually teaching you, they release their hold on your life. Every trigger, every irritation, every obsession is a doorway into deeper self-awareness and a powerful step in your spiritual development. When you begin to see that your emotional reactions are reflections of your inner landscape rather than the world attacking you, you reclaim an extraordinary level of freedom. You stop feeling powerless and start noticing how your inner world quietly shapes everything you experience: your relationships, your choices, your opportunities, and even the people you attract. The truth is simple, but life-changing. The world is always showing you yourself. And the more honestly you look at these reflections, the faster your spiritual growth accelerates. When someone provokes you, look inward and ask what part of yourself they are echoing. When a person stays in your mind, look for the unlived potential they represent. When a pattern repeats, look for the lesson it is trying to teach you. Because every moment, every reaction, every encounter is a message from your own consciousness, guiding you toward the person you are meant to become. 3. Your problem is not a problem. The real problem is the unconscious. Your problem is never the real problem. You are meeting the part of you that has been buried for years, and it is rising because it wants to be seen, understood, and transformed. This is why depression, anxiety, addiction, or the sting of failed love hits with such force, because what hurts is not the surface event, but the unconscious trying to become conscious. As Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Once you stop fighting what your inner world is trying to reveal, everything in your life begins to shift. You keep choosing the same type of partner, falling into the same emotional traps, or repeating the same painful cycles, not because you are unlucky or broken, but because an unconscious pattern is playing itself out through you. Your psyche will repeat the same lesson in different disguises until you finally understand it. That is why a familiar heartbreak feels like déjà vu, why certain people trigger you instantly, why the same emotional storms return again and again. Your unconscious is knocking on the door, urging you to wake up. When you finally turn toward it instead of running from it, you begin to see that each problem is actually a message. Every fear is an unopened letter. Every emotional collapse is a mirror. Every ache is a guide leading you back to a forgotten part of yourself. Jung said, "What you resist not only persists, but grows stronger. The moment you stop resisting, the pattern begins to loosen, giving you space to breathe, reflect, and choose differently. When you feel panic rising, loneliness tightening your chest, or the old addiction whispering again, pause and say, "This is not the enemy. This is the messenger." Then ask yourself where you have felt this before and what this feeling is trying to tell you. The moment you ask honest questions, you step out of autopilot and into awareness. And awareness is the first doorway from shadow into light. You may realize that the partner who won't choose you mirrors a childhood wound of being overlooked, or the boss who never approves echoes the inner critic you learned to obey long ago. Once you see the pattern clearly, you are no longer trapped inside it. Instead, you gain the freedom to respond differently, to set boundaries, to choose peace over chaos, to walk away from what hurts, or to receive the love you once pushed away because you felt unworthy. This is why Jung reminded us that one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Healing is not about pretending you are fine. It is about telling the truth about what has been living inside you. When you do that with compassion instead of shame, you interrupt the cycle that has followed you for years. You can start simply by noticing what repeats, naming the need beneath it: safety, love, validation, rest, and giving yourself what you have always begged others to give you. Take one small kind action each time the old feeling returns, whether it is breathing deeply instead of spiraling, speaking honestly instead of shrinking, or choosing calm connection instead of chasing intensity. As you do this consistently, you begin to rewire your emotional patterns from the inside out. Growth is not linear. It is a spiral that brings you back to the same lesson at a higher level of awareness each time. That is not failure, that is integration, the quiet miracle of becoming whole. When doubt whispers that you are not ready, remember Jung's words: "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." This path is not about becoming someone new, but returning to the self you abandoned to survive, offering it the love, steadiness, and presence it never received. With every moment of honesty, every breath of awareness, and every small act of courage, the pattern dissolves. You step into a life where you respond instead of react, where you love without losing yourself, and where you finally understand that the problem was never a punishment. It was the doorway to your freedom. If you're ready to face the truth within and rise above the unconscious patterns shaping your life, declare it now. Comment below, "I choose awareness," to show your commitment to your inner transformation. 4. Every conflict you have ever had is you punching the frame. Every conflict you have ever lived through becomes clearer the moment you understand that you have never truly been fighting other people. You have been punching the frame, striking at the invisible borders of your own psyche without realizing it. When Carl Jung said that the outer world is a projection of the inner world, he was pointing you toward a deeper level of spirituality, where the world does not simply happen to you, it happens through you. This means that the arguments you replay in your mind, the disappointments that haunt you, and the people who trigger something sharp and familiar inside you are all reflections of a part of yourself that has stepped outside and is asking to be acknowledged. You are not at war with the world. You are wrestling with your own shadow, the unclaimed emotions and forgotten memories that shape your reactions long before you consciously choose them. And this recognition marks the beginning of true spiritual awakening. As you sit with this truth, you begin to realize how often your anger, fear, or defensiveness was not about the situation in front of you, but about something unresolved within you, something that felt too painful or too overwhelming to meet directly. So instead of facing it, your mind projected it outward, turning the world into a mirror that reflects what your inner self is trying to reveal. This is why the same patterns repeat, why different people can give you the same emotional wound, and why certain conflicts seem to follow you no matter how much you try to change your environment. The story is not happening outside of you. It is happening through you, shaped by the parts you have not yet allowed yourself to see. Jung understood that projection is not a flaw, but a message, a map pointing back to your inner landscape. And the moment you begin to recognize this, you stop blaming life and start understanding it. When you finally withdraw projection, life does not magically reorganize itself. You do. The world stays the same, but you see its truth with clarity that feels like stepping from shadow into light. You no longer mistake your emotional reactions for reality. You begin to separate what is happening outside from what is happening inside. This does not mean forcing yourself to be calm or pretending everything is fine. Instead, it means noticing the feeling as it rises, recognizing its origin, and asking yourself, what part of me is appearing in this moment? You may discover an old fear disguised as irritation, an old insecurity dressed as jealousy, or an old wound expressing itself as anger. And with every moment of awareness, the projection loses its power, and the conflict dissolves, not because the situation changed, but because you did. This is the quiet, powerful shift that spiritual awakening brings: the realization that the world is not against you. The people around you are not your enemies, and your life is not a battlefield. You simply spent years fighting reflections you did not know belonged to you. When you stop punching the frame, you stop hurting yourself through others. You begin to reclaim your energy, your peace, and your ability to respond instead of react. And as this inner shift deepens, life starts to feel lighter, clearer, and more truthful. Not because the world has softened, but because you finally see it without the distortion of your own unhealed shadows. 5. The ultimate key: consciousness. The ultimate key Jung points to is consciousness. And when he says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will run your life and you will call it fate, he is revealing the silent force shaping everything you experience. Consciousness is not about controlling your reactions or forcing yourself into a certain way of thinking. It is the ability to see the truth exactly as it is, without distortion, without denial, and without the protective illusions your mind has built over the years. When you look closely, you realize that life has never been acting randomly toward you. The situations that repeat, the patterns that hurt, the people who trigger you, they are reflections of the hidden parts of yourself that have not yet been brought into the light. As you begin to observe these patterns with honesty, you discover that spirituality is not an escape from reality, but the courage to face what has been moving you from beneath the surface. Every emotional reaction is a message. Every frustration is a mirror. And every painful moment is a doorway into deeper spiritual development. Jung understood that the true struggle is not between you and the world, but between you and the unconscious beliefs, fears, and memories shaping your behavior. The world outside is only echoing what lives inside. And when you realize this, you finally stop fighting life and start understanding it. Consciousness grows the moment you choose to notice what you once avoided. A trigger becomes a teacher instead of an enemy. A repeating cycle becomes a lesson instead of a curse. A difficult person becomes a reflection instead of an obstacle. When awareness shines on what was unconscious, its power dissolves instantly, just as darkness disappears when a light is turned on. This is why your deepest spiritual development begins the moment you decide to see yourself honestly, even if the truth is uncomfortable. And as this awareness expands, something profound begins to shift within you. The past no longer feels like a prison, but a map explaining how you became who you are. Your emotions become guides, showing you where healing is needed. Your relationships transform because you finally understand the inner wounds they were mirroring back to you. Life becomes less about survival and more about awakening, less about reacting and more about recognizing the deeper patterns shaping your reality. In this way, consciousness becomes the heart of spirituality itself. It is the quiet turning inward, the gentle seeing of your own inner world, the willingness to stop running from yourself and finally understand the truth beneath your experiences. And the more conscious you become, the more life begins to open in ways that feel aligned, meaningful, and deeply freeing. Because you are no longer controlled by what you cannot see, you are guided by the clarity you choose to create. If this awakens something deep within you, take the next step. Subscribe to the channel for more spiritual wisdom that helps you expand your consciousness and transform your inner world. 6. All the knowledge you seek outside of yourself is already within you. All the knowledge you seek outside of yourself is already within you. And every time you look for answers in books, videos, or teachings, you are not absorbing something new. You are awakening something ancient that has been sleeping inside your own mind. Carl Jung said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." And when you truly understand this, you begin to see that you never learn from the words themselves. You learn from the way your inner world reacts to them. When a sentence touches you, it is not because the sentence is powerful, but because it activates a truth you already carry. A truth that has been waiting for the right moment to surface. This is why two people can read the same line and walk away with completely different experiences. One feels transformed, while the other feels nothing. And the difference lies entirely in the inner landscape meeting the words, not the words themselves. Every insight that feels meaningful to you becomes meaningful because it reflects something you already know, but have not yet fully seen. What you believe you learned from Jung is really your own spiritual wisdom being mirrored back to you through his language, and the calmness, clarity, or awakening you think he gives you is actually your own psyche recognizing itself. You project your fears onto stories, your hope onto teachings, your longing onto symbols, and then you call the result a lesson, as if the transformation came from outside when it was actually rising from within. Jung hinted at this when he said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Because learning is not an act of taking in information, but an act of remembering who you are beneath confusion, noise, and fear. Every so-called new understanding you gain is simply a forgotten part of your soul, stepping back into the light. This is why spiritual wisdom feels familiar. You do not discover it. You recognize it, the same way you recognize your reflection in a mirror you haven't looked at in years. And as you listen now, you are not just hearing these words, you are filtering them through your history, your pain, your desires, and your deepest questions. You are shaping the meaning of every sentence through the lens of your own psyche. And this process is what creates understanding. Nothing outside of you has the power to teach you what you refuse to see inside yourself. And nothing outside can awaken you until something within is ready to rise. So when a lesson lands so deeply that it feels like your entire world shifts in an instant, it is not because the lesson is extraordinary. It is because you have finally reached the level of awareness that can recognize it. Every moment of awakening is a moment of remembering. Every moment of clarity is a moment of returning. And every moment of transformation is a moment when the self meets the self and finally understands its own language. This is the haunting truth Carl Jung uncovered. You are both the seeker and the source, both the student and the wisdom, both the question and the answer. 7. You are not the ego, you are the observer. You are not the ego because the ego is simply the collection of thoughts, emotions, and identities that rise and fall inside you, while you remain the one who sees them all with quiet clarity. Carl Jung's most haunting lesson reminds you that you are not your problems, not your fears, not the racing stories inside your mind, because all of those are the observed, and you are the observer, the silent awareness that witnesses everything without being burned by any of it. Spirituality becomes real the moment you realize that your thoughts appear and disappear like clouds. Your emotions rise and fade like waves, and your memories shift like shadows across the day. Yet something in you stays unchanged, steady, and open. This is the hidden doorway of spiritual awakening. The recognition that the one who watches cannot be harmed by what it watches. And the moment you feel this separation, even for a second, the loops that control you begin to fall apart. Jung understood that people suffer most when they believe they are their inner storms. When anger rises, they say, "I am angry," and the identity fuses with the emotion until clarity disappears. But when you shift to, "Anger is arising, and I am noticing it," everything changes because you have just placed awareness above reaction. The observer creates space, and in that space, your choices reappear. Anxiety works the same way. Your mind predicts disasters, your chest tightens, your breath becomes shallow. But when you say, "Anxiety is here, and I am watching it," the spell breaks. Loops only survive when you feed them with identification. The moment awareness steps in, the loop begins to dissolve because it no longer has a self to cling to. This is what Jung meant when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Because the unconscious is not just hidden memories. It is also all the emotional storms you mistake for you. To understand this observer more deeply, imagine yourself as the sky. Thoughts are clouds, emotions are weather, sensations are passing winds, but the sky itself is untouched by any of it. No matter how violent the storm becomes, the sky never breaks. or imagine sitting beside a river, watching water drift by. Each thought is a leaf, each memory a branch, each emotion a wave. When you forget who you are, you jump into the river and get swept away. But when you remember the observer, you sit calmly on the bank, watching everything pass, choosing wisely when to step in and when to let go. This awareness is not cold or detached. It is the most compassionate part of you because it can hold every emotion without drowning in it. It can sit with grief without collapsing, sit with fear without running, sit with joy without clinging. The observer is your deepest form of love because it gives every part of you room to breathe. Once you begin living from this place, your inner world reorganizes itself. You stop negotiating with every painful thought. You stop believing every anxious prediction. You stop collapsing into every emotional wave. You begin to act instead of react, choose instead of repeat, respond instead of spiral. This is why the final truth Jung wanted you to understand is so liberating. You are not the one spinning inside the modular loops of the mind. You are the awareness in which those loops appear. And every time you return to the observer, you break another layer of unconscious patterning, making room for clarity, strength, and transformation to rise naturally, the way light fills a room when you open the curtains. Through this recognition, spirituality becomes lived experience, and spiritual awakening becomes the natural expression of who you already are beneath every storm. If you're still with me, and this insight about the observer is speaking to you, comment, "I am the observer," below. Your voice helps us grow this spiritual community. 8. Enlightenment is not about changing yourself. It is about realizing your true nature. Enlightenment is not about becoming someone different, but about realizing your true nature. Because in spirituality and spiritual development, the real shift happens the moment you stop trying to transform yourself into an ideal and begin to see the truth of who you have always been. You were never meant to build a new identity from scratch, only to recognize the deeper self that has been quietly guiding you beneath all your fears, habits, and defenses. When you understand this, you see why Jung said your life is the journey of unconsciousness into consciousness. Everything you struggle with is not a punishment, but an invitation to wake up to the patterns operating in the dark. The anger that erupts too quickly, the insecurity that whispers you're not enough, the urge to please others even when it hurts you. All of it is your psyche trying to show you where you have forgotten yourself. And the moment you bring awareness to these patterns, their power dissolves because nothing can control you once you fully see it. This shift does not require force or perfection, only honesty. When you admit you are tired, you rest. When you admit you're avoiding the truth, you face it. When you admit you're scared, you choose courage instead of pretending. Each act of honest awareness becomes a step back into your center, the place inside you that has always been steady, present, and whole. As you move deeper into this awareness, life becomes less about fixing and more about seeing. You start to notice how your reactions are shaped by old wounds, how you sometimes interpret neutrality as danger or love as a test, and how much simpler everything becomes when you pause and question the stories running in your mind. You begin to respond rather than repeat, because you understand that what remains unconscious becomes fate, and what becomes conscious becomes freedom. Even your relationships start to shift. You stop trying to control outcomes and instead speak your truth with compassion. You listen more deeply, not just to what someone says, but to what your body feels when you hear them. You express your needs without blame, and you allow others to be themselves without trying to reshape their behavior to soothe your own fears. This is how presence replaces performance, how authenticity dissolves insecurity, and how you slowly return to the person you were before the world told you who to be. Over time, you realize that awareness is not passive, it is power. It gives you the clarity to take aligned action, small but consistent steps that match the person you want to be. You tell the truth sooner. You breathe before reacting. You choose one simple act that honors your values each day. You let discipline flow from devotion instead of fear. And when you inevitably stumble, you do not collapse into shame, because you finally understand that growth is not a straight line, but a continuous returning, a steady remembering of the self beneath the noise. This is the heart of spiritual development, living from the truth instead of the stories, choosing consciousness instead of old patterns, and allowing your inner light to shape your outer world. 9. Living this truth, moving from living in reaction to living in awareness. Living this truth means shifting from a life built on reaction to a life lived in awareness, where you finally understand that your inner world is the source of every experience you face. Carl Jung called this the movement from unconscious living to conscious participation in your own life. And when you begin to embody this spiritual wisdom, you realize that every moment life challenges you is actually life revealing you. So when someone triggers you, instead of immediately defending yourself or blaming them, pause long enough to ask, what part of me is being projected right now? Because every reaction you have toward another person is a reflection of something hidden within yourself, asking to be seen. And when the same problem shows up again and again, not as a coincidence, but as a pattern that keeps looping, shift your question from "why does this keep happening to me?" to "what unconscious pattern is trying to become conscious through this situation?" And that single shift in awareness changes your entire inner landscape. When something hurts, instead of turning away from the pain or seeing it as an enemy designed to break you, try to recognize it as a message sent from a deeper part of your psyche, a signal showing you a place within yourself that has been ignored, denied, or misunderstood. Jung taught that there is no coming to consciousness without pain. And when you truly understand this, you stop running from your emotional wounds and begin listening to them as teachers. Pain becomes a doorway rather than a punishment, an invitation to understand yourself on a level you once avoided. And through that awareness, you begin to see every emotional experience, pleasant or painful, as part of a larger inner conversation with your own soul. This is not the mystical version of the law of attraction, not the oversimplified idea that you magically create everything by thinking positively or negatively. This is a grounded, observable psychological truth. Your psyche organizes your experience of reality. You are the projector, casting the image, the screen receiving the image, and the film being played all at the same time. Every person you meet reflects a part of you. Every conflict reveals a pattern within you. Every emotional wound exposes a layer of your unconscious. And once you begin to see this clearly, not as a theory, but as a living truth, you stop fighting the world outside and begin decoding the world inside. From here, awareness becomes your greatest power. You watch your triggers instead of drowning in them. You notice your patterns instead of repeating them blindly. You approach your pain with curiosity instead of fear. And slowly, you awaken to the fact that nothing in your life is random, nothing is meaningless, and nothing is truly against you. Everything is guiding you back to yourself, urging you toward a higher level of clarity, responsibility, and inner freedom. And in that shift from reaction to awareness, you finally begin to live the life your unconscious has been trying to lead you toward all along. In the end, Carl Jung's most haunting lesson reminds us that life is not happening to us, but through us. Every emotion, every challenge, every relationship is a mirror reflecting the unseen depths of our own psyche. When you finally understand this truth, you stop fighting the world and start transforming from within. If this message resonated with you on your journey of awakening, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe to Spiritual Wisdom. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming insights into your inner world and spiritual growth.